Morning Coming Down by Cody Goodfellow. "Hey, dude, look at this!" Toothless Stu shouts at Pike, who turns around to look just as the blue wind star swerves across 3 empty lanes to hit Toothless Stu so hard it cuts him in half. They're picking up trash off the slope of ivy-encrusted dirt alongside the northbound I-75 on a muggy Sunday morning. He's not 10 feet from Pike when it happens. Stu coming bounding down the embankment with something in his hand. Pike picking trucker bombs and jumbo jackrappers out of the scabby ice plant when the minivan comes shrieking in. The breeze from its passage snaps the big orange trash bag taut in Pike's hand like a matador's cape. Pike is looking right at him when it happens. Pike's pretty sure that, whatever it was Stu wanted him to see, it wasn't how totally he could be dismantled by a speeding vehicle. Stu is a pothead and a misogynist pig, but worst of all, he was a whiner. Everything he's said so far this morning remains like a rusty nail hammered into Pike's brain. He got sent across the freeway from the van on the southbound side because he wouldn't stop running his mouth on the van. Pike went with him because he got caught with the vodka and wouldn't say whose it was. Pike's working off the last week of community service for a DUI. Still hungover from last night, would have the shakes if not for the eye-opener the boys passed around in the van. The only thought that doesn't make him want to dry heave is the dream of drop-kicking the mouthy punk into traffic, although right now there isn't any. Whatever Pike is going to say comes out as an empty croak with some bile and an Altoid behind it. The late model Windstar with oxidized blue metallic flake paint and peeling fake wood paneling separates Stu's pelvis from spine like a picked flower. The top half of the skinny stoner caroms off the sloped windshield to windmill in the air, impossible to miss in his day-glow orange safety vest. Instantly, the other members of the litter crew, all bunched up on the southbound shoulder, drop their bags and bolt for the van. The Windstar swerves up onto the embankment, then sloshes back onto the road with the airbags deployed and the horn stuck braying like an air raid siren. It's 7:14 on a Sunday morning in late September. Already hot before the sun peers over the 12-foot retaining walls of I-75, the air sticky with yesterday's exhaust and tire dust. Nobody but fishermen, truckers, and long-haul travelers on the road at this hour. The kind of Sunday morning quiet that dares you to break it, that gently urges you to go back to bed until happy hour. And the top half of Toothless Stu still hasn't fallen to earth. Pike looks down at the fresh skid mark on the thirsty asphalt, like a hesitation mark before the splash of impact. No brakes, just the skid of a wild turn, like they meant to hit him. Stu's torso comes to rest 20 feet away on the shoulder, next to shredded treads of a blown-out tire and a tiny pink child's slipper. His legs are a jumble like a big crushed spider about 50 yards to the south. And the thing Stu is going to show Pike, the thing that cost him his life, rolls up to his feet. He starts to bend over to pick it up, but a jolt of ice water shoots up his spine. He turns and looks over his shoulder. The northbound freeway curves to the left and dips behind the next rise of coastal hills a few hundred yards away, enough to give them a few seconds to see oncoming traffic. A Lumina passes by in the fast lane, slowing just enough for the passenger to make eye contact with Pike, who snaps out of it to wave his arms and croak, "Call 911!" The act of speaking sends a blue bolt of epileptic agony through his brain. Pike's been doing okay so long as he moves as if his skull has no lid. If he carries it with the gentle care of a mug full of piping hot coffee, he won't stroke out before he gets some relief. Not until he smells the unripe brown bouquet of Stu's last meal does it occur to him to move away. His foot touches the big pink stuffed bunny with Toothless Stu's blood all over it, kicks it down the road. Pressing on his right eye, biting back bile because he hasn't had solid food since Friday night, he turns to walk as fast as he can for the van without spilling his brains. Choi, the driver, throws the loading doors open, but stiff-arms the men trying to climb aboard, shouting in their faces to get out there and help the assholes in the Windstar. Community service, putos! So Choi is the only one in the big orange Econoline, when it gets rear-ended by the pickup. It's a big-ass F-150 long bed with 4 day workers crammed into the cab. Must be late for a job in the next county. Doing 70 at least, it crushes the van's rear end like an empty beer can and sends it up, rocketing down the shoulder. 2 of Pike's crew get smashed like bugs on the grill. A third gets ground to flank steak between the van and the retaining wall. Pivoting on the axis of its engine block, the van rebounds off the wall and swings out into the path of a Miata, blowing 80 in the middle lane to pass a motorhome hogging the fast lane. The 2 of them collide and cartwheel down the freeway like hurled matchbox cars, catching up to the motorhome and the ski boat it's towing. The crushed hulk of the van sideswipes the trailer, sending the ski boat knifing over the median. The Miata chops into the motorhome's fiberglass cabin like cardboard, and like a mop, sweeping all into a neat, screaming pile, comes the runaway truck. Pike collapses against the concrete K barrier on the median, clutching his head to keep the dead, dry petals of his skull from crumbling and blowing away. Pressing his head against white concrete, stained with the ballistic scribbles from tires, bursts of color from traded paint. In the split second that it all goes spinning by, his heart hammering the back of his throat and bile scalding the raw, blood-crusted gutters of his sinuses, all he can think is, "Hit me!" The Ford pickup ends up nosed into the wall. The burnt maple syrup stink of coolant makes him sick up on his boots. The livid bug blood green gushes from the trunk, but it covers the burgeoning smell of the bodies strewn all around it. 2 guys in fleece-lined denim jackets hang out the windshield with their heads crushed in. The driver still sits in his seat behind the slack airbag. His phone, he's holding it to his ear and crying. No words. The sound is beneath words. Below despair. And everything hurts, but Pike homes in on that phone, on the sound that cuts through all the other sounds to stick a white-hot corkscrew into his hangover. The driver in the pickup truck smashes his phone into his face until the glass snaps, and tries to start his truck. 2 of the litter crew are still standing, clinging to the wall like piglets on a tit. A big bald asshole, Pike thinks he's named Larry, yells for Jesus. Bigot and a prick, but he was the one who smuggled the rubber douchebags of vodka on the van. The black guy next to him says, "Fuck this noise, let's go home." None of them have phones. Choi and the deputy took them before they got on the van. This stretch of freeway has 12-foot barricades enclosing it on both sides. The nearest off-ramp is directly across from them on the northbound side. The nearest off-ramp on the southbound side is a half-mile south of where Pike is basting in his own flop sweat, head swimming, heaving down the front of his vest. No cars are coming now, but he'll have about 3 seconds to cross all 4 lanes to the off-ramp, or he can stay here on his island with its patchy wall of parched xeriscape shrubbery. 3 out of 4 southbound lanes are blocked. He screams at Larry and the black guy to get off the wall. The sound of his own voice in his head is like a splitting maul right into the cleft between the hemispheres of his brain. Next to it, all this cars crashing shit could go fuck itself. He pushes himself upright, stumbles away from the median. It hurts less if he covers his right eye with his hand. He crosses the fast lane and stops short when he hears the honking horn. Pitch rising, the dove-gray BMW coupe eats up the world. Tires scream as it navigates between Pike and the ski boat. The driver's on her game today, but comes up short when she passes the Windstar, butt end up against the center divider. The Windstar's divider runs out in front of her with his phone in his hand, his mouth a huge empty O. Aerosolized on impact, he throws the BMW into a power slide that turns into a tight barrel roll, shedding glass and chrome like an animal shaking off water. fuck it. Nowhere is safe. They're all trying to die today. Stealing is stealing my only thing. Again. Keep moving. He passes the boat in the number 3 lane, keeping it between him and the next 2 cars. The cars keep coming in the southbound lane like an artillery salvo. Something hits the pickup, and a big gas can for the lawnmowers in the bed goes up in a whooping roar of daisy cutter shrapnel. The next one, a PT cruiser filled with hungover Marines, threads the gaps, then pulls over on the shoulder to call 911. Pike keeps walking, staggers, realizes he's gone in a circle, throws a leg over the concrete barrier, thrusting an arm through dry, filthy brush. Big stalks of Jimson weed disperse seeds in his face like giant dandelions. He heard in county lockup that you could smoke it and see shit like opium, except it paralyzed you. He feels like that now. Breath won't come in his chest. His heart wants out, a cat in a box, forcing his brain out his eye holes like juice from a lemon. Pike's headache gets 10 times worse. The Marines in the PT Cruiser take off, swerve out onto the road in a boomerang loop across all 4 lanes to kiss grills with a high-balling Volvo semi that smashes right through them like they're made of glass. Pike falls over the barrier and curls up around his angry, empty gut. The phones! It's the fucking phones! He hears the black guy coming and makes himself peek. The black guy overtakes him and mounts the barrier. Larry is up against the county van, trying to pull something out through a broken window. It's the bag with their phones in it, or maybe the amnesty bag for the booze and joints half of them tried to smuggle on the van. Pike throws a leg to come back over the barrier for Larry, or... Fuck Larry. There's his fucking flask in there. Maybe if he had a taste, he could see through his right eye without throwing up. The black guy says, "You dumb mother..." Red Camaro swerves into sight, weaving like the driver can't decide which side of the van to pass on, atomizes Larry like a doggy bag of shit and bones, smashing him into the van and decorating the next quarter mile of roadway with him before coming to rest against the Windstar, which wreck is by now maybe 90 seconds old. The black guy jumps off the median and passes Pike, who clings to the pitted, cracked concrete like deadwood in a flood even as an SUV comes, and the driver is crying as he swings the car to line up Pike in his sights, like a kamikaze pilot. Pike hugs the concrete barrier like his opponent in a 12-round heavyweight bout. Toothless Stu got clipped so fast he didn't even scream. A sure end to this shitty cycle of binging and purging and falling apart and pissing himself at the first sign of trouble. His muscles fail and he falls just before impact. Pike rolls into the planter between the barriers, sucking dust. The SUV slams into the barrier, knocking it off its anchors and cracking the concrete like stale bread off its rebar skeleton. Pike screams so loud he can't feel his headache. He's just a bug crushed between rocks. His bowels and bladder let go into his crappy county jail jeans. He doesn't even want to die anymore. He just wants to make it stop. The SUV's cabin collapses around its human cargo in a marvel of automotive origami. Nothing disrupts the maxed-out good news gospel oldies on the sound system until the violent advent of the front suspension and red-hot engine block to the spacious, genuine, leather climate-controlled front seating. Safety glass buckshot and scalding coolant wash over him as the sun goes out. The careening vehicle rears up on its back wheels, grinding sideways along the top of the barrier, then rolls onto its roof like a comically dead frog. Pike jerks up and flops over the barrier onto the northbound side, thinking, "Yellow pig dick cunt can't even die right." The black guy vaults a totaled Toyota, and crosses all four northbound lanes in a tight zigzag like someone shooting at him. A phlegm yellow Corvette narrowly misses him, swerving to clip the scalpel-shaped prow of the ski boat, making it skip and spin like a Ouija board planchette. The black guy shouts, "I'm all the way live!" and rounds the curtain wall to the exit just as the white Bronco toothpaste graffiti on the windows screaming, "Santa District All-Star Champs," comes barreling down the off-ramp to pick him for a new hood ornament, dragging him several hundred yards before he drops under the front wheels. If Pike was asked to pick, when he got in the van this morning, which of the roadside cleanup crew would be the morning's sole survivor, he would have picked anyone but himself. A silver Lexus on the southbound side slews to a sideways stop, then reverses into the wall, slams it into drive to smash into the median, then back into reverse. A minute stretches out and finally falls, and he hears no sirens. An old orange Toyota Land Cruiser screeches to a stop just past the off-ramp. A guy who looks like a young cop or a fireman on his day off gets out, taking out his phone. Pike tries to tell him not to, but his breath comes like broken glass, and all he can do is cough. A red Porsche slaloms through the wreckage and speeds on over the hill, honking its horn, and then, like a musical interlude in his headache, a siren. The off-duty cop waves down the highway patrol car, but it never slows down, pancakes the guy, and carries him off over the hill where the siren abruptly stops. Pike staggers across the northbound lanes in the ensuing gap. The headache pulses behind his eye now like a liquid, living thing, tired of hiding. He reels along the wall towards the off-ramp, but then veers towards the embankment. He falls down, but crawls up the slope on all fours, up through the ice plant and ivy to the top of the slope, against the fence. Pike looks for a place to sit down, and right at the top of the off-ramp, like a mirage, he sees the bench. Coral pink concrete with shells and marbles and other shiny things embedded in the cement. He sinks onto the bench, rolling onto his left cheek to avoid sitting in the cold, sticky mess in the seat of his pants, oblivious to cars smashing and people weeping, crawling from cars and getting hit, holding his brains in with both hands. A young woman with two broken arms whimpers and tries to get her baby out of a car seat. A man with blood streaming from multiple scalp wounds squirms out of his overturned Mirage and staggers up to the road screaming, I'm sorry, Mommy, Daddy, I'm so..." And then all is quiet, almost. With the right kind of ears, you might find it peaceful. It's crooked, wobbly, homemade, surrounded by flowers and urns and vases and wrapped in pink cellophane. Stuffed animals, pink and pale blue and creamy yellow. Fur matted with dust and rain and ankle-deep in roadside offerings. Napkins, candy, condoms, cigarette butts. A framed Olan Mills 8x10 studio portrait of a 4-year-old girl, giggling up at God, hugging the stuffing out of a pink horse, worn out and loved half to death. Bumper stickers on the wall and on the ground, over the faces of stuffed animals and on pictures of her stuck into the grid of the chain-link fence. Texting kills. Hang up and drive. Scorched ozone and rotten flowers on fire and green teeth and everyone you love is dead and he could taste them in his tears and it was all his fault and stop it, sorry, please stop. Carved into the lopsided base of the bench between his feet, right where he's about to puke, in loving memory Pike gets up and he's been sitting on her name spelled out in shells and imprints of flowers and leaves. He backs away from it and climbs the fence. He falls into a backyard at the foot of a grove of steel palm trees. When he looks up at them, it's like staring into the K-hole or a total solar eclipse. It's the source of the screaming. Cellular relays cunningly disguised as palm trees. In their dubious shade, a strip of Surrey prefab two-bedroom houses backed up against the freeway. This one has a big antenna thing behind it, like a box kite twice as tall as the house. The ham radio antenna has cables running up to the phony palm trees. The sliding glass door stands open just enough for the smells of burnt TV dinners and slow death to waft out on the damp breeze from inside. Pike crosses the brown, overgrown lawn, stumbling over a rusty tricycle hidden in the weeds. More toys, sun-bleached and brittle, clutter the porch. He steps over them and pushes the door open. He bangs his head into the door jamb, eyes crushed shut. He bangs his head again and again before he realizes he's not doing it. It's the sound, like animals in a slaughterhouse. He can't even hear it, and it's deafening. Sometimes he's sure he can hear songs in his head, like on his shitty dental college fillings. It's not like he's playing them in his head. He can't remember songs for shit, but sometimes when it's quiet and he doesn't have to think, he hears music like his head is a speaker cone, and he cries for wanting to climb up into that place where the radio waves live. If that was what being dead was like, he'd throw himself in front of the next car to pass by. It has to stop. He bites his hand until it stops shaking. Pike goes inside. Cheap particle board furniture with rent-to-own stickers on everything. A big old floor cabinet TV in the corner of the living room shows cartoons with the sound turned down. Beyond the living room, one doorway goes to a kitchen, the other to two bedrooms and a bathroom. The bedroom stinks like piss, and blankets are hung over the curtains to make it like a cave, to hold in the stink of the dead woman on the bed. Pike rummages through the mess of prescription meds on the nightstand and finds a couple painkillers. The sour stick woman with the plastic bag over her head and applesauce laced with cyanide obscuring her face, Pike figures was named Sylvia Robles. Then he goes to where the vibration is coming from. Like swimming upstream, he pushes against waves of pain, biting down so hard a filling in one of his molars cracks. The sudden frigid injection jerks him out of his fugue. He was looking for a way out anyway, but now the garage is hot, like a furnace. Computers, scanners, scramblers, and digital ham radio gear piled up on a shop bench stutter and blink. But though he can feel every tick and twitch of static, the room is silent but for the dull whir of fans. Big accident, Pike tells the man in the chair. You got any aspirin? He sits in a swayback lawn chair at the bench, head tilted back in contemplation of the portrait on the wall, the same as the one at her roadside shrine. The garage is dark, so Pike doesn't notice the mess on the ceiling until it drips on him. He must have put the cheap .22 automatic in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Most of his face is gone. A pair of headphones cling to his head at a jaunty angle. The vibrations are coming from those headphones. From all this shit. He looks around for something to smash it all. Books and magazines on cellular networks, neurology, psychopharmacology, almost thick enough to use as weapons, Curled clippings on the walls scream about cell phone use and brain cancer, cellular psychosis, and a bunch of pieces on the grief trigger, gaming the electrochemical temporary insanity of emotional trauma. He picks up a crowbar and goes to smash something when he notices the gun pointing at him. The man in the chair chokes and coughs, and clotted blood spurts from his demolished sinuses and the empty socket of his left eye. The bullet must have fragmented inside his face and come out in chunks without finding his brain. Pike lowers the crowbar, takes a step back. That your little girl? The man in the chair nods, tries to say something. What was she doing out on the freeway? His finger jitters on the trigger. I never had nobody, Pike says. But you sure showed them. Everybody knows what it feels like now. Speech comes out as a spray of blood and spit. The gun shakes in his face, and he sees that the man isn't pointing it at him. He's offering it to him. Oh, no way. I can't. His hands up. He's thinking of kicking the man out of his chair or just ducking and running. Please don't ask me to. But there is, in that glassy gleam of that one remaining eye, the last ember of what it was like to have someone that wounds him more deeply than the blitzkrieg of false grief and guilt of having lost what he never had. Okay, Pike says. Give me the fucking thing. A sickening, slurping sigh, and the man holds it out by the trigger guard, barrel tilted to the poured concrete floor. Pike pinches it behind the barrel like he's picking up a viper, wary of it squirming round in his hand to shoot him. He looks down at it and says, I'm sorry, and he puts it down. But it's not that easy. Shaking, with muted, ruined weeping, the man tries to stand up, trying to beg, to threaten and scare Pike. I can't, Pike says, but he kneels before the man. You gotta see. The man shakes his head, stumbling, clawing through ozone-charged air to get to his gun. Pike catches him, and the man sinks into him, shaking and choking up blood onto his chest. It's okay, man. It's whatever it is. You got anything to drink? The front door smashes in, and the whole house resounds with the thunder of boots and grunted orders. Thank God, Pike thinks for the first time ever. The cops are finally here. Relax, Pike murmurs. Everybody knows how you feel now. The tactical submachine gun rounds go through him and Mr. Robles and the wall of the garage and all the pictures of Alma Robles. Robles is still alive when Pike dies. That inside-out, one-eyed face on top of his sagging, then twisting into a grimace of defiant resolve. Just before he whips the headphones off his head and rips the plug out of its socket in the amplifier. And the last thing Pike hears is the sound that turned dozens of hapless motorists into suicidal furies on this ordinary Sunday morning. Alma laughing, Alma crying, at the moment of her birth. It sounds like angels.